Hey everyone, it's Jen Fishburne. Welcome back to my show, Preterism Changes Everything. And I was just wondering, I've tried a new camera out this week. Does it look better, worse? Am I looking at you a little bit better now? I know I've got my notes down instead of to the side, but hopefully when I'm actually looking at you, it looks more like I'm looking at you. So let me know. All right, so we've looked at Genesis 1 and 2 so far, and we've looked at the two different creation accounts, or what most people call two different creation accounts. And today we kind of want to look at them together and see how we can marry them up. So let's look at the first account in Genesis 1, and we're just going to briefly go over the summary of what we found there. So what we have altogether was created, I guess, was light and darkness, day and night, sunset, sunrise, the waters above, the waters below, and the dome separating them, the land and the sea, the sun, moon, and the stars, the fish, birds, and the bugs, the animals and the reptiles, and mankind. So that's a lot going on in the first chapter of Genesis. That's the overall creation story. Now, in the second chapter of Genesis, what we saw was this, and it's a little bit different story, right? There's no bushes, herbs, or rain, but first God forms Adam from the Adamah, the ground. Adam, Adamah, ground. So then Jehovah, he plants a garden, and he places Adam in the garden. And then the trees sprouted and grew in the garden. And then 4 rivers run through the garden to water it. And then Jehovah made the animals and the birds, and Adam named them. Now, he was in the garden when he did this. So these are the animals that are in the garden. And I did look it up this time in the Bible. There's just under 200 animals listed in the Bible. I was pretty close on that. And I doubt if all of them were in the garden. But even if they were, let's just say that they were 200. Could Adam name 200 animals in one day? Yeah, pretty easy, I think. Pretty easy. All right, and then Jehovah built Eve out of the side of Adam, and that was in the garden as well. So now, what is a garden? We have different kinds of gardens in the U.S. We might have a vegetable garden or a flower garden, and it might be just a little tiny area around our house. In England and Europe, a garden is more like a park, and it's a place that you go to, and it's usually a walled enclosure, and it is set up in a very specific pattern and way. It is often very highly designed. I've been to a bunch of them, and maybe some of you have as well. They're beautiful. But a garden is basically just a walled enclosure. Now, there's 2 things that can be in a garden, the biblical word for garden. The first is trees, so it's an orchard. The second is animals, so it's a zoo. So the Garden of Eden was both a zoo and an orchard, and that's what was going on here, okay? And had a fence around it of some sort. It was enclosed, all right? So the first wall that we see around a piece of property is in Genesis 2. I know that might be controversial, but I like putting those things out there every once in a while, all right? Okay, so now, what's going on here? Is this a different creation story? Or is it simply the creation of the Garden of Eden? It seems to me that this is the part for the whole. And we see this a lot in the Bible, part for the whole. So the first chapter was the big picture creation of the whole heavens and the whole earth. But now we kind of zoom in on one tiny little area, one little piece of land in the Middle East, where God decided to plant a zoo garden with lots of animals, lots of trees, and he gave it to Adam and Eve to take care of. It doesn't matter if the animals or Adam was created first. They're both created on the same day, and that is consistent in both chapters. It doesn't matter that the Garden of Eden wasn't fully landscaped yet, because it was not the focus of the big picture overall creation account of chapter 1. So think of it this way. A land developer plans out his whole subdivision with all the houses, the roads, the parks, the swimming pools, and even the nearby gas station, grocery store, Walgreens, all that stuff. All the surveying, all the mapping, and the designing is done. The floor plans are all complete. The infrastructure is in place, and now it is time to build the first model home. That model home is the Garden of Eden, in our very rough analogy here. And I believe that's exactly what chapter 2 is about. We see the big picture, and now we're zooming in the camera for a very close-up view of the Garden of Eden. And just because the Garden of Eden is built does not mean that everything else in the rest of the earth is developed yet. It's not. There's no houses anywhere. There's no places for people to live anywhere. So this is the model home that is being built right now. Okay, so in the model home, what are we going to find? We're going to find the way that all the others should be, right? This is the one that we're going to set the example after. So they're our model. So in our model home, the first of anything that we see is always important. So let's take a few minutes to just look at the first of what we've seen in this story so far. And this is we're going to follow our model home analogy, all right? So first we're going to have blessings. In any home, there should be blessings. In the Bible, it's full of blessings. And so it starts out with a blessing. And so here's the blessing that Jehovah gave to Adam and Eve. All right? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Now, how do I know that's a blessing and not a command? Because it says so. Okay, in the verse it says, and Jehovah blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. So what are these blessings? So the blessings are they're going to have lots of kids. That's a blessing. All throughout the Bible, that's a blessing. It may not sound like it to you today, but all throughout the Bible, that was a blessing. Okay? They're going to fill the whole earth and subdue it. They're going to take control over it, right? They're going to be in charge. They're going to rule it. They're going to, it's a strong, strong word of taking charge there. And have dominion. They're going to rule over the fish, the birds, and every living soul, every animal. So Adam and Eve were going to be in control of the whole earth. They're going to take care of the part that God gave them to take care of. And then he's blessing them with food. And so he's giving them all the green stuff and the fruit, all the vegetables and the fruit, and the nuts and the seeds and the grains and the beans. That's basically what he's talking about here. Some of you might not think that that's a blessing, but it is a blessing because that's actually what gives us health today. So that's a blessing that God gave to Adam and Eve. Very first blessing. Now, even though it was just to Adam and Eve, I believe that it's a general principle for all people. So it is a blessing for us today to be able to take care of the earth, to be able to take care of the animals, to be able to have kids and teach them to do basically the right things and taking care of the earth and the blessings of creation that God has given to us. It's a blessing to be able to eat food that makes us feel good, to be healthy, to be strong, to be well, to be able to do the things that you want to do in life. Those are blessings. And those are things I think that we should still be giving God praise and glory and thanks for every day. I really do. So that's a principle that applies to us. It was not specific to us at all, but it's a principle that applies to every single one of us. And so I just think it's a magnificent gift that our Creator has given each and every one of us living here on earth. And so then that was our first blessing. Now we've got a first commandment. This first commandment comes with a curse for disobeying it. You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you will not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you will die. Now, this was only to Adam and Eve, right? We have never been given this commandment, not even in principle, I don't think. We all know good and evil from the time that we are 2 years old. Some of us before that. None of us died the day that we first started knowing the difference between good and evil. Now we're going to get into that a little bit more detail when we have the fall here in the next chapter. But for right now, this is not a commandment that applies directly to anybody. I don't even think it's really a principle, because every single one of us does know good and evil. All right, and then we have our first principle. Now, a principle is not a commandment. It's not a blessing. It's just kind of a general truism that applies. All right, so let me read it first and then we can talk about it here. It is not good for a man to be alone. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother. Something in my eye. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So this is not a commandment, certainly not given to Adam and Eve. It's saying that because Adam and Eve started out this way, therefore, this is a general principle that applies to everyone. Because it is still not good for man to be alone. Even though that was specifically about Adam, it's generally about everyone else. And if we follow general principles in Scripture, not laws, if we follow general principles, they will help us to live a much better life. And I do believe that a man and a woman married and in a really good relationship, loving one another, are going to have a really, really good life. And I think that that's what God put in place for us, and that's a blessing then. So that principle then becomes a blessing to us. So what I don't see here so far is I don't see covenant. You can let me know if I missed it somewhere. What I don't see so far here is the law of Moses. That comes about 2,500 years down the road. What I don't see here so far is Israel. That comes about 2,500 years down the road. What I don't see here so far is any reason to read any of those things into the first 2 chapters. Now, those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. I'm going to be addressing different views that people have out there. Some of them are common, some of them are not common. And so if you're not aware of some of these things that I'm talking about, then just let that go right over your head and don't worry about it. I'm just trying to stick to the basics in this teaching and teach really what the Bible just says without reading a whole bunch of other stuff into it. So those are things that we have some friends that are teaching some of those things, and all I can say is that they're reading that into it. It's just not there. Okay? So what I do see so far is I see the natural, material, literal creation of a physical heavens and earth that we know as our world, and all of the elements that make it up and make it function. So it was definitely a functional creation, but it's also a material creation. So let's go over those elements one more time because we started with that today. The light and the darkness, the day and the night, the sunrise and the sunset, the waters above and below, the dome separating them, the land and the sea, the sun, the moon, and the stars, the fish, the birds, and the bugs, the animals and the reptiles, and mankind. So, let's see. I think that I'm going to stop here because we're getting into Genesis 3 next. So do we have any indication at this point that the next passage, the next chapter, will be any different from what we have seen so far? Let me know if you think I am missing anything at this point. Otherwise, we're going to go into chapter 3 tomorrow with the same kind of approach that we've been taking to the first 2 chapters so far. All right, you guys have a great day. And hey, I'm ending this on time today. So talk to you tomorrow. Bye.